What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Think Different Theory. My name is Josh Forti, and happy Wednesday, guys. It's a good day to be alive, as always. We have another amazing, super exciting special guest for you guys here today. And I know I say I'm excited for every guest, but guys, I just am, okay? Like, literally, I get to interview cool people every single day for a living. Like, my life is amazing. I'm not even gonna lie. It's like my dream job, which everybody should go have their dream job. So I get excited to talk to all these people because I love interviewing people. I love learning, and we get to share it with you guys. But my next guest specifically that we're going to be bringing on here is actually a diet guy. So he teaches all about different types of diets. We're going to talk about the carnivore diet. He's friends with Natalie Hodson, who we've had on the podcast before, who's absolutely awesome. And for me, someone that, I mean, guys, as you know, like I'm getting a whole lot better at eating healthier. I really am. But my Panda Express, my McDonald's, my chocolate milkshakes, I mean, I'm just telling you, my cheese curds, it's all terrible. I know. But it's where we're going on it. So anyway, guys, real quick, I do want to remind you, don't forget, less than a week away now, Traffic Secrets, March 17th. It is on a Tuesday. This book drops for pre-order. We got some amazing, cool bonuses. We've got bonuses from Natalie Hodson, from Steve Larson, from, who else we got? Arnie. I'm looking at my board up here. Arnie Giske, Brad Gibb, Marley, all sorts of really cool people have contributed really cool bonuses. So when you buy it through the link, you not only get all my bonuses, you get all of their bonuses, and that will be all on the page, the waitlist page, and the page when it goes live. So March 17th, Tuesday, mark your calendars. Going to be amazing, and we're going to have super tons of fun. And we have a really big announcement that I can't tell you until Tuesday, and then we will announce that. So it's going to be super fun too. Okay, guys, without further ado, I don't want to keep our guest waiting any longer. We're going to bring him on right now. Kurt, how do you pronounce your last name, dude?
Yazici.
Kurt that. Whatever he just said right there. Kurt, welcome to Think Different Theory, man. I am so pumped to have you on.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right, so diet, man. What an interesting topic to get into. Let's start there. We're gonna get into your backstory. We're gonna get into who you are and who you serve and all that, and you can drop all the goodness on. But like, dude, how do you decide, like, I'm gonna go and learn about the carnivore diet? How does that come about?
It's an interesting story, and I could talk a lot about it, but I will just tell you that I've been in the entrepreneur space for 6 years, and I had anxiety for a long time, and I realized about 5-6 years ago that the foods I was taking, the things that I was consuming, made a huge impact on how I felt and how I could sort of operate day to day. And diet seemed to be the biggest lever. And that became a realization, especially when I got into the carnivore diet about a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Oh, okay, interesting. So when you say, all right, so when you say anxiety, I feel like we need to kind of talk about specifically what that all involves, because I'm a pretty controversial person, and I am a huge believer that the body can heal itself. I believe that through your thought and belief, and then through what you put into your body, both physically with food and the output through exercise, and then the same thing with the mind, that pretty much we don't need modern medicine. I mean, modern medicine has its place. I'm not dissing modern medicine for the place of where it is, but like, I really do believe in those things. And so when it comes to things like stress and anxiety and things like that, making controversial statements about like, hey, anxiety is all in your head and you can essentially cure yourself from it, is something that I think a lot of people tend to, like, Josh, you've never had anxiety, which I have. And you know what I mean? Like, things like that. I do think that there are certain levels of it. So I think it's important to define kind of where we're coming from and what you specifically mean by anxiety and what we're talking about here specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I had anxiety. So everyone experiences a level of anxiety throughout their day to day. You know, you go and approach a girl that you're attracted to. You're going to, as a guy, if you're single, you're going to probably feel some anxiety from the social consequences of looking like an idiot or just, you know, putting yourself out there and being vulnerable. If you go and you have a big presentation or just being on a podcast like this, there's a little bit of energy that comes in with that you want to perform and show up right. And so that's a natural form of anxiety. The anxiety I'm talking about is the kind of anxiety where you wake up and you feel like you're carrying a weight and you are kind of like afraid to kind of go about your day to day. And it becomes a pattern that manifests. And I think we do have that sort of neuroplasticity in our minds that creates grooves of thought patterns that we end up sort of revisiting. Kind of, I think Tony Robbins talks about kind of like the habits become habitual, and the thought patterns become sort of an emotional home that we live in, and we stay in that. And unfortunately for a lot of people, anxiety gets to a point where it's embarrassing, because you're like, why do I feel this way? It's very isolating. It's very fear invoking. And so what I found was, like, when I left corporate world after being at Microsoft and Zillow for 8 total years after college and going off to become an entrepreneur, I just wasn't prepared for my business growth, and my businesses outgrew me as an individual. And I wasn't emotionally ready for that. And so I had a business where I had 30 plus employees, and it just, my mind and the way I was able to kind of like take things in, I just was overwhelmed. And the way that I processed that was not healthy. And I started to sort of manifest in avoidance patterns. I would go out, I would, want to not go into the office as much. I would go to the gym, which isn't a bad thing, but there was a lot of things I did. And so the anxiety ended up being this point where I was feeling anxious throughout my day. And I would wake up feeling anxious. Now I don't do that. Now I definitely feel stressed, and I feel, like I said, natural forms of anxiety from time to time, but it's not this level of underlying kind of foundational. It's
I'm like a panic almost. Yeah. Like a panic of like, oh my gosh, like I'm just waiting for something to go wrong almost.
And mine manifested into a panic attack. I was sitting in my office. I was looking at the numbers. Financially, we weren't doing good. We didn't know where our money was going to come from. We had a lot of broken processes and things that were going on. And I was CEO, and I was just like, ugh. And then I just kind of like, my heart started pounding. I was sweating. And the next thing I knew, I got lightheaded, and I had to walk upstairs, lay down. And I ended up walking myself over to a local urgent care. I talk about this in my book. And it was basically a panic attack I gave myself. And that kind of imprinted in my biology, in my physical self, a feeling of trauma. And it sort of anchored in this anxiety that then sort of continued to manifest, because I had all these outside triggering moments that I didn't know how to deal with, and I didn't know anything about what was going on.
Yeah. And I think what's super interesting is kind of going back to, you're talking about like Tony Robbins and habits and like things like that, and how these things are formed. Like, we operate based on, and going into a little bit of mindset stuff, guys, here. We operate based off the stories we tell ourselves, right? So like whatever story that we're going to continue to tell ourselves over and over and over again, subconsciously, that's how we're going to operate out of. And when you talk about how like habits are formed to kind of put ourselves into this state of anxiety, it's when have you ever read the book, The Power of Habit?
Oh yeah, with Charles. Charles Duhigg.
Yeah. So I'm good. So when a habit is formed, a habit is caused by a trigger, right? And then there's this response that happens to that trigger, and then there's this essentially emotional connection, or this emotional feeling that happens, this hit of dopamine or whatever at the end of it, so that okay, this trigger happens, then I automatically go and do this thing. And then at the end of it, I'm going to have some type of reward. And it sounds crazy to say when it comes to anxiety, but your body, the anxiety is actually creating this hit that your brain is actually like craving, right? Because at the end of it, you get this reward of it. And it's scientifically proven that the exact same thing is when you're anxious and nervous is the same exact feeling in your brain as excitement, right? So it's just how you perceive. It's the lens that you put on. So when you talk about waking up and having anxiety, I mean, I remember for me, my low point, my crashing moment when it all came crumbling down for me, I was stressed and anxious from the moment I got up. I mean, I would wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning in an all-out sweat, and just like being like freaked out about the fact that I've got all these client responsibilities and I can't sleep and I can't do, and like just my everyday function is like I had to have something there. I was drinking 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Dr. Peppers a day, just chugging them down, because I was like dealing with this, and it was because of the emotional triggers that were going off in my brain. I was writing the story that said, hey, anytime I felt this way, go into this habit, then I was going to get this hit. And that was this loop of anxiety, right? And so that's why I believe that you can reprogram. And it sounds like you're right there with that. It's like, hey, if we can change what's causing that, we can change what goes on in the brain. If we can change what goes on into our body, essentially you can change the outcome of anxiety. Is that what we're kind of referring to here?
100%. I think when we look at the environment, right, it's the triggers. Like there's a lot. So I read a lot of books on anxiety. I went through a lot of counseling and just tried to understand it better. And a lot of it's environmental and built into our nervous system, right? So it's at the reptilian level of our brains, where we have something called neuroception. Our nervous system has a perception of our environment and what's triggering us anxiously that is outside of our conscious awareness. And there's authors that write about this. There's a book called Focusing by Eugene Gendlin, and he was a psychologist at the University of Chicago, and he talks about how those sensations that you were explaining about feeling nervous or excited are very similar, but then the interpretation you make in your mammalian brain to define the emotion, which is a combination of the actual sensations coming from your reptilian brain, is how you categorize it. So, your excitement might come from your heart, just as anxiety comes from where your heart center is. But then the way you define it and what you label it, and then how you interpret that cognitively, completely sets the tone in a very different way for you.
I love that. Okay, so let's talk about this, and I want to kind of go back to your backstory here and how you got into this and a little bit of what you do, because I think that's important for people that have never heard of you. And before this podcast, I mean, I had no idea who you were, and I got introduced to you through Natalie, who I trust tremendously. But talk to us about your backstory. Why are you credible? Why should we listen to you? And what ultimately got you to this point?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I just wrote a book on the carnivore diet. It's launching in a week. So I guess, am I credible? Am I not credible? I've been an entrepreneur for 6 years. Our business has sold about 14 million in product over the last 6 years. So whether or not that makes me credible or not, I don't know. I did work for Microsoft for 4 years.
Sorry, what's your business real quick?
So I have 2 companies, but the company that has done the majority of our revenue is called Crush for Ties. And so we're basically a company that focuses on affiliate marketing, and we sell a bunch of products using Facebook ads.
Okay.
I met Natalie through Influencer when I was down in San Diego last year at Brendon Bouchard's conference.
Nice.
And she was a speaker there, and then hired her as a coach. As far as credibility, I mean, the carnivore diet's pretty new. It's only been really a big mainstream thing for the last 2.5, 3 years. And it really got popular when Michaela Peterson and Jordan Peterson were on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah, I remember that.
So for most people, it's hard to say, oh, why are you credible? Or, what makes you qualified to speak about it? And I'm not a doctor. I studied biology. I have a degree in biology, and then I have a degree in engineering. But honestly, appealing to authority in today's world I think is one of the worst. It's one of the reasons we're so sick as a population. We've constantly looked at people who've run studies and created the belief systems they have to teach us conventional wisdom, like high cholesterol is terrible. When we've created these systems in the modern healthcare system where doctors specialize. But the problem is the doctor that looks at your heart and your cholesterol isn't looking at your gut, and they're so connected. And if you change what you put in your gut, your cholesterol could easily go down. But the doctor that looks at your heart and doesn't know about your gut and what you're eating could give you a statin and lower your cholesterol synthetically with a pharmaceutical. But it's no, bro, I don't have hypocholesterolemia. I'm not genetically predispositioned for high cholesterol.
Right.
I'm just on a ketogenic diet, and you've never seen one, and you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so there's so much you can go into that.
And I think this is an important distinction when it comes to health. So quick side note backstory, just so that you're aware. I had a sister when she was 5 years old, I think. Maybe she was 6. Anyway, she had seizures. She started having seizures, full out seizures. It got so bad it was every 8 minutes, right? Number one child epilepsy doctor in the world. We took her to at the Cleveland Clinic through the grace of God, friend of a friend, goes in, diagnoses her, looks at my parents and goes, I have no idea what's wrong with your daughter, right? Can't solve the problem. And we're like, great. What do we do? My mom literally went and was like, diet, the gut cures everything. I'm going to, kind of go figure this out. Finds the ketogenic diet, and through meticulous weight and just crazy amounts of everything goes, and through diet alone and oils and coconut oil and things like that, cures my sister of epilepsy. She has no seizures anymore. And over the course of the next several years, weans her off that diet to where she's a completely normal person again today. So when you talk about the gut and when you talk about how this is all connected, I am 100% a believer in that. And one of the things that I learned and noticed, and I'm really curious your thoughts on this, is I've kind of seen doctors will look at the symptoms that you have And rather than going and looking at what's actually causing that and trying to solve it there, because of the society that we live in, that there should be a fix and I should be able to get back on my normal way. And because anything that takes longer than a pill or 30 seconds is not right or is going to interfere with my life, they go and they say, here's a pill that is going to solve the problem as long as literally nothing else changes, right? But oh my gosh, all of a sudden you eat more junk food and now that problem doesn't solve anymore. Or you change your diet here and now that suddenly becomes very, very, very bad for you, what they've prescribed for you. And so like I see them treating the symptoms rather than the root cause. Would you agree with that?
100%. I mean, look at diabetes. What do we do for people? They're insulin resistant, meaning that they're not responding physiologically to insulin. So we pump them with more insulin. That is not solving the problem at the source. The source is you have too much metabolic dysfunction. Your body can't store and respond to the insulin that's already naturally at the levels in your body. You need to go on a fast. You need to stop eating carbs. You need to stop eating sugar. And instead of that, we give them a prescription to pump up the insulin levels to obscene levels, and they get fatter, they get sicker, they get more. And so we're not solving the problem. It's 100% true. And we're not knocking on doctors, right? Like they've been trained in such a traditional way. And I think they do want to help people genuinely.
For sure.
But the thing is, like, man, if you really choose that as a profession, you kind of owe yourself an obligation to constantly be learning in that space, because so much is changing and we're learning so much about how important it is to affect the actual root cause of disease. And fortunately, things from Cleveland Clinic, like Mark Hyman and the functional medicine movement, have started to sort of make it more mainstream to look at root cause disease. But it's really fascinating to see things like the carnivore diet coming into mainstream and how much of an impact it's having on people's health, because it's really changing the game for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think one of the problems, and I'm glad you brought up the point, we're not bashing doctors, because like doctors have their place, right? And like you said, I genuinely do believe that doctors want to help people. I mean, that's why they go into the profession, right? I think one of the issues for doctors though is like there's so much regulation now. You know, like they have to prescribe certain things. They can't do certain things.
Yeah. I mean, they're getting paid. I mean, think about it. Like a clinic that does orthopedic surgery is going to make way more money, and they're a business. They're a for-profit business. They're going to make way more money performing a surgery or prescribing a quota of pharmaceuticals than they are just sending the patient back and telling them to change their diet.
Yeah.
And it's an economic driver that unfortunately we haven't figured out the economics of how to make this more influenced in the way that can help people long term, I think. And that's something where at the grassroots level, things like carnivore ketogenic diet can really make that change.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't think we have time to go into the whole problem with the system and changing that or whatnot, but you know, there is so much regulation, there is so much money, there is so much power, there is so much lobbyists. And quite frankly, if we were to go and you're not just attacking pharmaceutical companies at this point, you're also attacking Monsanto, who I'm sure like, you know what Monsanto is, and the giant, I grew up a farmer, right? So everything was Monsanto. And like Monsanto, we're talking the food industry here, which you think, I mean, the pharmaceutical companies have tons and tons of power. I don't know which one technically has more, but right up there with them is Monsanto, who literally has, for those of you that don't know, like Monsanto is a seed company, more or less, or really a food company, but like a seed company for our crops, for corn and things like that. They have police forces in-house that drive around to farms. And if I'm an organic farm next to a farmer that does Monsanto corn and they spray their crops and the wind carries that pollen over onto my organic stuff, I had no control over it. Monsanto can come and confiscate my farm and my crops because they own the patents and the rights to it. And they're just shutting down farms. And so you're not only attacking the pharmaceutical companies, now you're attacking the food companies, and you've got probably hundreds of billions of dollars at this point that you're fighting. So I think there is a huge dilemma there. So we're focused on how the individual, you and I, can solve this problem. Maybe not in a mainstream way, but at least for you and I, what we can do to start taking steps to eating healthier, to eating clean, and to go and solving these problems there. So moving this conversation towards that way, where specifically do you focus? And we're going to talk about the carnivore diet here specifically. Who's the carnivore diet designed for? And like what ultimate result are we getting if we follow the diet?
So the carnivore diet is designed, in my opinion, it's designed for someone who, man, that's a broad question. I will say that for an achiever, the carnivore diet is the optimal diet for you. And the reason I'll say that is because I find that a lot of achievers are willing to make sacrifices, and the carnivore diet is going to ask you to make a huge sacrifice in the variety of foods that you eat. The flip side of that is you are going to eliminate a lot of the toxicity and the inflammation and the autoimmune triggering molecules that come with the slew of plants. And the premise here is plants have been in an arms race with animals on this earth for hundreds of millions of years. As much as the superfood plant industry wants us to think that molecules like isocyanates or resveratrol or polyphenols are incredibly antioxidant and healthy for humans, they're actually defense molecules that plants have created that actually hurt you. And if you look at the holistic image, not just zoom in on one picture of how they trigger our liver's NRF2 pathway and actually activate our glutathione production in our natural sort of xenohermetic response to the actual molecule that is a pesticide the plant makes, you then see a much bigger picture and you're like, holy crap, this stuff actually causes inflammation. It penetrates my gut barrier. It actually goes in and triggers autoimmune and inflammation at levels. And it's designed to do that. It's designed by the plant over hundreds of millions of years because the plant can't run. It can't chomp at its predator. It can't claw away. It literally is stuck there in the ground like a guy in a beach with his body buried in the sand. Like you literally have no escape mechanism. And so plants have developed these mechanisms. Humans evolved from primates. Took us about 6 million years, but we think that we became the humans we are, that we're able to have this conversation and create the computers and read and really evolve our brains to the capacity they are now is because of the nutrient dense animal foods that we started consuming back about 5-6 million years ago. And then we saw human brain size really explode. We saw our gut size shrink. We saw our gut acidity go to a higher level than most carnivores because we were scavenging the bone marrow and the brains of carcasses at our early stage evolution. And then we became taller, more erect, and we were more of an apex predator where we could actually throw. So there's a lot of evolution that we're looking at in that respect and all kinds of nuance there. But that's kind of the whole idea there with the carnivore, and why I think it's so valuable is because we think, and I'm a pretty big believer in this theory or hypothesis, that carnivores are it's the ultimate diet for brain health. It's by far the ultimate diet. You can't get DHA from plant foods. You get ALA from plant foods, but your body has to convert that. Your omega-3 fatty acids come from animals. That is one of the most crucial components of a brain. Cholesterol doesn't exist in the plant family. You get cholesterol through production in your body. Actually, you produce about 12 egg yolks worth of cholesterol a day. And cholesterol is not going to kill you. I promise you. There is so much information now out there about the lipid hypothesis and how we actually don't know that cholesterol is killing people. It's actually not the cause of what's of the inflammation and the atherosclerotic plaque. It's at the scene of that location, but it's actually probably a protective mechanism. It's probably something the body's producing to repair the damage that's being caused by leaky gut and toxins bleeding through the gut barrier into the bloodstream and then damaging your blood vessels. So I'm kind of going on a little bit on and on.
Interesting. So,
but
sorry, go ahead.
No. Well, I was going to say, so for me, it's like you get B12 from animal foods, you get DHA from animal foods, you get choline, creatine, carnitine. These are like the power foods of your brain in your emotional health. Like these are building blocks. You get heme iron from animal foods. None of that exists in plant foods. You need heme iron to create dopamine, to have mental health. And we see studies now coming out that are interventional studies, like proven situations where we've intervened and looked at the data and gone, okay, this vegan population, much higher rates of depression, much higher issues with cognitive decline. And then we go in and we look at the animal food interventions. And what's happened is we've clogged the data. We've looked at people who have historically eaten a lot of food, a lot of red meat, versus people who have become mindful and eaten a lot of plant foods. And we've gone, oh, well, if you ate a lot of plant foods, you were so much healthier than the guys that were eating those cheeseburgers and fries, and who else knows what they mixed in with their meat.
Right.
And we made the meat the villain. And the crazy thing is, if you have high quality meat, it's not what needs to be vilified. In fact, that is probably the most nutrient dense, least consequential food you could consume for your brain. And so I think for anyone who's an entrepreneur struggling with any sort of mental health issues or gut issues, it's a fantastic diet to consider.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is, I'm completely new to this, right? Which actually makes for great episodes, because now I'm right there with the listeners here, right? So it sounds like, I'm going to get into why we're bashing vegetables so much here in a second, but it sounds to me like we're focused on, this is a diet for optimizing the brain and a diet for almost like optimizing overall performance and nutrients. Would that be correct?
It's hard to give it an exact title like that or label, because in my experience and my understanding and what I've done to the research of the book, it's pretty much the optimal aligned diet for a human being.
Okay. So
when you start introducing plant foods, you're not really getting a lot of benefits overall. You're actually usually introducing toxins that are hurting your body at all levels.
Okay.
Hormonally. Yeah.
So I want to talk about plant foods here in just 1 second, because that's obviously a big, huge part of this. But is there anybody that like this diet is not for? Is this like, if you're doing this, if you're like a super hardcore athlete, or you're trying to lose weight, or you're trying to, is there somebody like this that's like, don't follow this diet if you're X?
You know, I hate to say that it's like, it's for everybody, but it's really hard to look at people and tell them to go plant-based. Like from a overall holistic perspective, there is nothing that I found in my research writing the book and from what I've seen in the community where being plant-based gives you an advantage. Now, there are some extreme cases where we see people needing to do carb backloading with long distance or really high performance type athletics, and maybe in some cases bodybuilding, where literally a person wants to be in anabolic building muscle mode 15, 16 hours a day. Then there's some unique situations. For everyone who's an entrepreneur, for even the most elite achievers, if you want physical performance, you want to optimize hormones, all that, this is going to be an optimal diet for you. And I don't see any outliers where that's not going to be the case. There may be some very unique situations.
Right.
We're talking less than 2% of the population where someone is a hyper responder in an allergic way to red meat. Because there's always some genetic polymorphism out there.
Right. We're not focused on the exceptions to the rule here. We're looking at the rule. Okay. So we got 3 core topics here, I would say, to cover. I think let's just go in line here. I think the first one is, let's talk about fruits and vegetables then, right? Because this is, I would say, let's say, attacking fruits and vegetables and saying that plants are not needed in your diet anymore would probably be one of the more controversial things that you could say, right? I mean, like, we've had people on the podcast that are, help people that are just like, just eat your fruits and vegetables every day. If you do nothing else, just make sure you eat your fruits and vegetables every single day, right? It'll help you. My mom, I mean, like, a huge proponent of fruits and vegetables. And don't get me wrong, dude. If you're telling me that I get to eat more meat and less fruits and vegetables, you are like my hero, right? Like, I'm like, sounds awesome, right? But like, what do you mean by that? And specifically, like, are fruits and vegetables actually bad for you? Are there certain vegetables and fruits that you're wanting to stay away from? Talk to me about that specifically, as far as, what do you mean? Should I just not eat fruits and vegetables anymore?
Yeah. So when I talk about a carnivore diet, there are a lot of different people in the space. Probably the bigger influencers in the space would be Dr. Sean Baker, who's on the Joe Rogan Experience, and Carnivore MD, my good friend, actually, Dr. Paul Saladino, who just wrote a book called The Carnivore Code.
And real quick, didn't Joe Rogan try the carnivore diet?
He did it the first month of the year, and he lost like 17 pounds. He got cut. He said his mental clarity was like, he had never been clearer. His energy levels were very consistent. And it was just like, he had some awesome experience with it.
I'm trying to find the video here. You guys can probably go find it on his Instagram.
He posted it on his Instagram. He's like sitting there in like a CrossFit gym, and I reposted on my Instagram too. And he had a great experience.
Yeah, he goes. Yeah, here it is. Carnivore diet update. Lost 12 pounds. Feel amazing. Lots of aches and pains went away, and I have improvements in my vitiligo. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm impressed. I haven't decided if I'm going to keep eating like this, but this month was very beneficial. Edit. The explosive Uber diarrhea stopped around 2 weeks in. It's been totally normal the last 2 weeks. So, I mean, Joe Rogan, who I love, I mean, he gave it a shot, and that's his response for it. So explain to us what we're talking about here.
Okay, so you asked about how, like the general diet, and then never eat vegetables and fruits. So my approach is more in lines with Saladinos, where I recommend a nose to tail approach. So when we look at a carnivore diet, a nose to tail approach.
Okay, nose to tail.
Which basically means you're not just going to eat like ribeyes all day long and drink water. Like you can do that, and you'll probably be better off than eating the fruits and vegetables. But I recommend adding in liver and kidney. And the reason I recommend that is because if you look at an animal and you look at where it stores its nutrients, the same with human beings, a lot of our B vitamins and vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, even vitamin E, alpha tocopherol, is stored in our liver. And so when you eat an animal liver, you actually get the same biochemistry that your body takes in. And so eating beef liver, not every day, but every couple of days, every few days, that is nature's multivitamin. And you're getting all those vitamins that you just don't get in the same quantities that you would get from muscle meat. And so I recommend constructing a nose-to-tail carnivore diet. When you do a nose-to-tail carnivore diet, though, you don't need anything from fruits and vegetables. And the crazy thing is you don't need fiber. And all the vitamins you think you would need that would come from like lemons, like vitamin C, or carrots, like beta carotene, that's all in the liver. It's all in the kidneys, and you get none of the other nonsense that those foods would give you. And there is molecular stuff in these foods that is designed to prevent them from being eaten. If plants evolved to be a perfect superfood for animals, they never would have existed. They would not be here today. They would have been consumed and destroyed from the planet. Like we would have, just like the woolly mammoths, we would have eaten them to extinction. But they have evolved mechanisms where animals know, and you can see this in nature, they'll go and they'll eat certain plant foods, but they're survival foods. And a lot of times for a herbivore, they know based on the level of toxicity, how much of a plant they can eat, and they'll eat some of it, but then they also have adaptations. They have much bigger guts to process and ferment the fiber that's in their system. They have a different level of acidity. They have actually unique enzymes in their saliva. A lot of herbivores are chewing food for like 8, 10, 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
We don't do that. Like humans just chomp it down and it goes into our gut. Our gut gets really acidic. We rip it all apart in our gut and then we absorb it. And so it's just crazy when you start digging into the biochemistry of this, and then you start questioning all the conventional beliefs around animal foods not being healthy and go, actually like liver from a cow is insanely healthy, and like cholesterol is not what's killing a human being, because first of all, your body makes it. Your brain is like 70% cholesterol. It's in every cell membrane. And you just start looking at all this stuff and it's just, it blows your mind.
So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it sounds like that the reason that you don't need fruits and vegetables anymore, and that we can do this through the carnivore diet, is that the nutrients and the nutrition that you would be getting from a fruit or a vegetable, the good part of the fruit or vegetable, can be found in types of meat like liver and heart, and you can consume it that way and avoid all of the negatives that come with plants. Is that correct?
Yes. And if you think about it evolutionarily and you go out into nature today, what are you going to find? You're going to find a rabbit or a deer, or, maybe there's a wild cow back in the day, but
right.
Like, the point is you're not going to go start chomping on bark or tree leaves or grass. Like the silica in the grass would destroy you. Like there is nothing evolutionarily for most human beings on this planet that is not seasonal from a plant perspective. So when you go into your supermarket and you look at all those beautiful avocados or bananas or lemons that you're eating, they're not naturally there. They were shipped in from thousands of miles.
Yeah.
They're genetically modified, and they're loaded with lectins, with different molecules that we know destroy, that can really hurt the human gut. In your gut, it's kind of crazy to think about this, but think about your environment, right? So we know as entrepreneurs, it's really important that we get influenced by the right things.
Right.
Going into your mouth and down your esophagus, into your stomach, there is literally a single layer of a cellular membrane between what comes into your environment that you're exposed inside your gut and what actually goes in your bloodstream. And like 70% of your immune cells are there because your body needs to be really focused on what the hell is coming in there. Sorry for that.
No, you're good.
And not messing up or getting into the bloodstream. And so your environment is just as much inside of your stomach as it is outside of you. And so when you're putting in foods like plant molecules that are toxic, that are not a native thing that you would have been consuming as a human being for probably millions of years.
But like, what about like apples and pears? Like what about like fruits that grow on trees? Like, I feel like that's kind of pretty natural for us to go eat, right? I mean, like vegetables I can kind of see maybe, but like, and keep in mind, I know nothing about this, right? Yeah. So I am asking questions like a dumb idiot that I am when it comes to all of this. And I'm like, what about an apple?
But you know where would you have seen apples and pears? Like 6 months of the year, you got colder season. You're not going to get fruit. Fruit blooms in the spring, and it's a very brief period of time where nature creates a sweet kind of plant food that can then be consumed by certain animals to fertilize the seed. But it's not something that nutritionally gives you a lot of benefit. I mean, it spikes your blood sugar. It's very seasonal. It's not something you don't eat apples. Like, you don't see apples in nature year round. Like, they're never in the winter. The only thing you're going to eat in the winter is going to be animal foods.
So
plants are survival foods.
Okay. Plants are survival foods, meaning what?
Meaning, as human beings, we have some biochemistry and some mechanisms that we still carry to process plants when we cannot get animal foods.
Okay.
But the nutritional value of hunting a deer or an elk is so much more valuable, and the nutrients we get in that animal are so much less triggering for people. That's why we see in the carnivore community, if you go on there and you look, you just see case study after case study of anecdotes. It's not a true study.
Right.
It's a lot of anecdotal feedback, but you see so many people reversing autoimmune diseases and reducing inflammation, losing weight, getting their brains back, because they're literally feeding back into their bodies the sort of diet that we were ancestrally designed to eat.
And do you think that's due to eating meat, or is that due to lack of eating vegetables? Like, to me, it seems like, I guess it seems kind of like a combination of both, but it almost seems to me like where you're pinning a lot of negative is around fruits and vegetables, and that fruits and vegetables actually do a harm of some sort. Is that true?
Yeah. No. I'm 100% saying that most fruits and vegetables are not going to be a net positive on a human body.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm saying that if you just started adding meat, you probably would feel better, because now you're giving your body more of the essential nutrients that it's designed to take in, essential complete amino acids from protein, the B12, cobalamin that your body needs to build nerve sheathing and process nerve stuff. You're getting a lot more source of that nutrient, creatine, choline, all that stuff that you don't get in plants. But then removing the plants, there are all those plant toxins, those things like lectins, isocyanates. In fact, broccoli, as much as I'd love to tell you that broccoli was amazing and that your mom was right when she told you to eat all your broccoli on your plate, it's actually not at all the case. If you eat a lot of broccoli, you get a lot of gas, you get a lot of protein, or you get a lot of fiber. And there's so many things in plants. There's a whole list of stuff I talk about and break down, but you look at the biochemistry, there's nothing in, almost no foods in plants can natively be accepted by humans, which is not necessarily an argument that we are carnivores, because herbivores will eat plants and convert them. But when we eat animal foods, the vitamins and the nutrients that we get from the animal foods is actually coming through in a native form, and we're not using our internal biochemistry. We're not having to switch on mechanisms to convert those sort of nutrients. Like, for example, vitamin A in plants is only in beta carotene, but vitamin A in animal foods is retinol. Retinol is the form that our body actually utilizes for eye health, for nerve health, for brain health. So it's just a testament. Like, why would this vitamin, we can eat it in a human and we don't get inflammation, we don't get autoimmune triggering, and there's really nothing in the biochemistry when we take in like a piece of liver other than copper, vitamin A, and all these vitamins, versus like a plant. If you find it in vitamin A, like beta carotene, you might also get some sort of triggering molecule that could just trigger your gut, could cause inflammation, things like that.
Okay, so what type of meats are we talking about here? Because I can't imagine McDonald's it fits the bill there. So like, what is there a specific type of animal? Is there a specific way it's cooked? Like what type of meat are you referring to here specifically that we should be focused on if we're going to eat this diet?
So usually the redder the meat, the better. So red meat is preferred.
You're literally going against everything that I've ever heard. And like, don't get me wrong, I love it. I just think it's hilarious because I'm like, if this be true, man, my life is going to be so great. I get to eat red meat all day. But okay, so red meat here.
Red meat is preferred. You get more pack per punch in terms of the nutrient profile. You've got more of the amino acids. You've got more of the kind of superfoods that we call in animal foods, like creatine, and it tends to also carry more fat, which is where a lot of the stored vitamins and minerals can be in the animal. Now, to your point, that's also where we store a lot of our toxicity. So if you're eating an animal and it's innately that animal was chomping on Monsanto soy feed, then it's possible that it might have glyphosate, Roundup in there. It might have genetically modified stuff that just would mess it up, and it could be sick, and it could have antibiotics and other things that pass through its fat.
So we're looking for clean meat.
In a perfect world, we would eat regeneratively farmed, organic, red meat, like grass-fed beef, grass-fed bison, some elk, some deer meat, things like that, and maybe some pork as well. Technically, that's considered red meat. Those would be the better cuts. There's nothing wrong with chicken. There's certainly some benefits in some of the dark cuts, the dark meat of chicken. That like vitamin K2 is pretty high in chicken, for example, dark meat. But you don't get quite as much of that full meat profile, and it tends to be more lean. And one of the big arguments around the carnivore diet is it's a ketogenic diet. And so the beauty with the ketogenic diet, I don't know if you've done anything with that on your show before. You probably have experimented with ketones or ketogenic diet.
Yeah, we haven't had anybody on specifically to talk about it, but I know what you're referring to when you mean that.
So ketones are really unique. And one of the things we think about in the carnivore community is getting our bodies into a low level of ketosis. And the reason for that is, unless you're like an extreme CrossFit, like high level competitor where you absolutely burn out your muscles for multiple hours a day, and you need to just pump in like a direct drip feed of like honey or some high glycemic carb to just go right into the muscle, which is probably not ancestrally consistent with most of us. We're not going to be doing that. You are probably better off running on ketones. Ketones burn oxygen much more efficiently in the body. They create a lot less reactive oxygen species in terms of oxidative damage when they're actually converting and being used for energy in our cells. And ketones is what the body shifts into metabolically using when we're no longer consuming carbohydrates. And so,
okay, so I guess that's my question right there. So for those people that have no idea what this is, you're better off running on ketones versus what?
Carbs,
okay.
Glucose.
So
we have two mechanisms as a human being.
Okay.
We can either run on carbohydrates, and we actually, ironically, this is interesting, Josh, we see equatorial tribes, some equatorial tribes where they have year-round access to carbohydrates. They can thrive on carbs, and they don't have markers of diabetes and some of these health markers we see in the Western society, eating a very high carb diet. But the caveat is they don't eat fat. They eat very low fat. So it's an Atkins diet. Atkins diet was really famous for basically being high protein, high carb, low fat. Ketogenic diet is low carb, moderate protein, high fat.
High
And
fat.
as you mentioned with your sister, they treat epileptic patients, which is also another testament to this and what it does to your brain. Your brain is mostly fat and cholesterol. It loves ketones. In fact, ketones are they're more neuroprotective and they're beneficial to the brain. We talked about the damage, the oxidative damage that can happen with burning a lot of carbs. I don't think ancestrally our ancestors were constantly chomping on berries or pears or apples. They had a woolly mammoth and they ate that thing in their tribe for, 3 weeks. And then they didn't have food for a week or two, and they were fasted and they were running on ketones, because when your body doesn't get food and you tap out your native glucose sources, your native carb sources, you are running on ketones. And when you eat a moderate protein, high fat diet, your entire physiology is shifted and you're now in ketosis. And that's where ketones, which one of the most popular ones is beta hydroxybutyrate, that molecule can be substituted for a carbohydrate glucose molecule to give the cell energy to produce ATP and actually run your body.
Okay, so one of the things that happened with my sister when she went on the ketogenic diet, and I just always remember my mom saying this, is we did not want her body to go into a state of, I think it was ketosis, but I could be wrong on that, where the body starts storing fat. We wanted to get, and this is specifically for her. I understand this is different because it's her for seizures, but it was as she started having seizures when her body got too much stuff that it, instead of feeding the brain and feeding the body directly what it needs, it's like, oh, we have an excess. Let's go create fat cells and store it. And when that happened, that's when she would have seizures. Are we talking about anything in relation to that here?
So it sounds to me, and I'm a little rusty on this. It could be that, so your body doesn't store fat when you're eating fat. It's kind of a confusing thing, because you're like, oh, fat makes me fat, but that's not true. Your body stores fat when you produce insulin. The reason you produce insulin is because you're eating sugar. When you eat a carbohydrate, you're getting sugar in your body. That's not inherently bad, but what happens is the insulin in and of itself, when it comes in, it's a hormone that regulates the blood sugar in your vessels, in your blood vessels, in your kidneys, in your heart. If blood sugar goes above a certain level, it has to be very tightly regulated. Then you can damage the blood vessels and you can get kidney damage. So what happens is the excess sugar has to go somewhere, and insulin opens up your fat cells and it stuffs the sugar into your fat cells. So ironically, when you eat carbs, they get stored as fat when you have too many of them.
Okay. So, excuse me, going back to eating this way, clean meats, red meats, typically beef, elk, deer, bison, things like that. Chicken's not bad. What about fish?
Fish is great. There's definitely some conjecture and discussion around the benefits of fish. We see a lot of societies that are really healthy with fish.
Yeah.
The fish fats are obviously a big one, the omega-3 fatty acids in fish. The big caveat with fish and thing you got to watch for is the quality. It's always a question of how clean it is, because there's a lot of, unfortunately now in the Pacific, there's a lot of radiation from Fukushima. And then in the Atlantic, there's a ton of pollution. So you can kind of pick one of lesser evils.
Yeah.
A lot of fish is just dirty.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And I think that that's just kind of true across the board. You got to be really careful with the meat that you're putting in your body. I grew up on a farm and it was all organic, all grass-fed beef. The guy we bought it down, we'd buy a cow at a time, right? And it was 100% organic, grass-fed, clean meat. Now when I get a meat, it's organic, free-range, grass-fed beef, things like that. So, that type of meat, this is the type of meat that we're referring to. We're not saying, hey, go down to McDonald's or go down to, your local whatever that has the cheapest crappy meat and that's good for you. We are talking specifically about clean, healthy meat here, right?
So you can eat even conventionally raised beef, and as long as you're not getting heavily loaded on the fat content of the beef. So if you want to do ground meat and it's fairly lean, even conventionally raised grain-fed beef is going to be fine for you, and it's going to give you quite a bit of nutrients.
Okay.
The big thing we're trying to avoid is like atrazine and glyphosate, which are Roundup and hormone disruptors that are carried mostly in the fats of the animals. Okay. So I recommend for people, don't let good be the enemy of perfect, you know? So if you can do just like, that's just what fits your budget, it's probably still a lot better than eating most of the plant foods that you think are healthy for you, but are actually triggering you. Again, if you do good, do you.
Right,
but for a lot of people, I think this can make a big change.
Okay.
So conventionally raised meat, when it starts getting into the fattier cuts like ribeyes and the big fat caps, and then if you're actually going out and seeking fat in itself, like fat trimmings from the animal, then it's more important to watch for grass-fed and just make sure you're avoiding those grains and the chemicals that come with those grains.
Does the level of how well it's cooked matter at all?
That's an interesting one. So actually cooking it too much is probably more of a challenge than undercooking it. I've actually gone raw carnivore for about a month, and everything was raw.
Bro, and that's some insane.
You got to be careful. You obviously need to trust the source of your meat. But I do drink the blood in the meat that I eat. Most of the meat I source from a farm that I know. So I'm very familiar with literally where the animal was.
Yeah.
And I've been to the land that the animal came from, and I trust them and I know who they are. And so the blood has a lot of magnesium and vitamins and other things that come out of it, but it doesn't taste that bad. But you know, again, you're like a vampire. You're like, what am I doing here? You know?
Right.
But
okay, wait. So,
yeah. So I can't even remember what you're asking me.
Was it red? Like how well should it be cooked? Because I'm a medium rare.
Oh yeah,
person.
yeah. So you I order my steaks rare because I feel like even the restaurants they cook them too much when they go medium rare. Okay. And the water soluble content in food, there are water soluble vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin B, are both water soluble. Those ones are more sensitive to temperature and evaporating and being broken from heat. And so you are better off eating certain foods, in particular kidneys, organ meats like liver and kidney, if you can stomach it and handle it. I try to eat those raw, and largely because I know those are loaded with the vitamins that I want, and I try to not cook them up.
It's interesting you say that. So kind of a gross story, people, if you're like, you know, I mean, if you're on this episode, I mean, you're already past this point, but I lived on a farm, and we raised and butchered chickens a lot. So free range chickens, stuff like that. I've butchered thousands of chickens in my lifetime. We had this, a friend of ours, we'd always go over to his place. It was his butcher shop. And he had this big, huge farm or whatever, but this dude is like the most out there dude, like houses made of straw bale. Like she has a straw bale house and like solar everything. Like this dude, the whole world could collapse and he'd just be living, right? He's great. But he, whenever we would go butcher chickens, he would do that same thing. We would literally go, he'd be butchering him. He'd rip out the liver and he would just take a bite of it right there. And I just remember being just so grossed out by that. Just was the worst thing ever. But he's like, dude, it's so good for you, yada, yada. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Okay, for the sake of time here, I do want to kind of move on. There's a couple more pieces that I want to touch on. What about like non-fruits and vegetable food, but that are also not meat? Are we staying away from those things like bread or pastas or sauces and things like that? Like, are you talking like meat and meat and meat? Or is there room for things like that? What do we stay away from as far as other foods when it comes to non-fruits and vegetables?
So in general, the carnivore diet's going to encompass anything that comes from an animal, and anything that's a plant molecule, you're going to try to nix out. And so any grain would be growing out of the ground. That would definitely be out. One interesting area that I'm experimenting with, Josh, is fungi. And so fungi is unique. It's actually technically oxygen consuming, and it's older than the plant kingdom. But we know some of the fungi have toxicity to them in terms of not just the psychedelics or whatever, but like actually, they have some craziness there. I don't know if you've explored like psilocybin or stuff like that, but yeah, it's an interesting topic.
I like psychedelics.
I just did a ceremony on Friday.
Actually. Really, yeah. I'm a fan. I'm a fan. Yeah, for sure. I would just say that. Anyone that's curious about that, approach it with caution. I firmly endorse it, but just like know what you're getting into, because It is unreal. Like, it is just so crazy. So, like, be in a good mental state before you go down that road, but I highly endorse it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So to kind of close out your question,
yeah.
it's all animal foods, plant foods in general. You want to nix. And the idea is you don't have to get rid of them forever. Think about getting rid of them it's an elimination diet. So
Yeah.
it's really like clean things out and then reintroduce and see how you feel, because everyone has a genetic kind of sensitivity.
Yeah.
You may find if you get rid of coffee for 60 days and then you reintroduce it, it just wrecks you. And you're like, holy crap. Like, I've been eating this for consuming this for 2 years. And I never realized how bad it made me feel.
Yeah. So what about for drinks then? Are you straight water?
So, yeah, pretty much all water. I have some of the Four Sigmatic, mushroom tea stuff, just cause I'm playing with the fungi a bit,
but mostly water.
Yeah. I don't do any coffee anymore. You could do coffee. Some carnivores, are like, go for it, and it has to work for you. So,
Right.
but technically coffee is got a lot of problems with it. It's got mold toxins
Well,
in it.
yeah, I mean, that's, yeah. It's
And
coffee.
then, for me, I found it caused a lot of anxiety. Some people have issues with metabolizing caffeine and it affects their sleep.
Yeah.
And I just found it was like a cycle for me. Like, when I get on coffee, it's like I need almost like to get back on it, to get back to baseline.
Yeah.
And then,
And then
so,
it's this,
so it's water. That's it, man. I just drink water and sparkling water. Cool. A lot of Topo Chicos and that kind of stuff.
Cool. Okay. So why? I guess both of my questions kind of fit into this next piece. There's two more topics I think I want to cover with this is why has traditional fruits and vegetables and the idea and concept around eat your fruits and vegetables are healthy for you. That's what you should be eating. Red meat traditionally is bad, quote, quote, right? Where does this logic come from first off? And let's start there. Where does the logic of why fruits and vegetables are healthy, where does that come from? And I guess we've already covered why it's wrong. So where does it come from? And why is it told to everybody?
So Western medicine back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s really followed some of the research done by a fellow named Ansel Keys. And Ansel Keys really demonized saturated fat. So saturated fat came on and we started seeing fat people, and we started looking at fat, and we started seeing kidney failure, and we started seeing protein in urine. And I can go into the details of them briefly, but the idea was they looked at data sets and they intentionally left out outliers to paint a picture that saturated fat was causing clogged arteries and killing people. And so that story became a mainstream platform for most of Western medicine that we see today. And most pharmaceuticals most medicine focused on eliminating that variable. And so fruits and vegetables naturally sort of started to fill in because we no longer had meat as a primary food source. And we started looking at different plant foods and researching and focusing in on the actual benefits of the antioxidant benefits there. And so that's the small picture of it. The other thing is the lipid hypothesis, which is this whole thing around cholesterol and how much we didn't understand about cholesterol, but we thought we did, around the fact that we were cutting open people who had cardiovascular symptoms and disease. And then we were going, oh my goodness, there's all this cholesterol and clogging and calcification within the endothelial layer of their arteries. And we went, man, they were eating all that cholesterol. What's funny is people think that red meat causes kidney damage, or that it can be, if you eat too much protein, your kidneys can start to fail.
Let's talk about that really quick. Just define this really quick. The common agreement or the common wordage around the negative benefits of red meat are what? Red meat is bad because it does blank.
It causes heart disease. It has cholesterol or fat in it, which contributes to that. It can be saturated fat. I think it's about 40% of animal fat is saturated fat, which again was very demonized as a source for cardiovascular risk. It can contribute to a toxin, endotoxin in the gut that people have associated called Nu-5GC, which we've gone and actually looked at the nuance of that. It's not technically true, but we looked at all those things and we looked at all those mechanisms, went, this is bad. Get this out of us.
So then if that is the accusation, or that's the common wisdom that says red meat does XYZ PDQ, which we just talked about here, right? If you're saying it doesn't do that, then what does cause those things?
We don't actually know. We think we know. And so what we think it is it's actually hyperinsulinemia and leaky gut. So most people are metabolically dysfunction. There's estimates of about 80% of Americans are at some level experiencing metabolic disease. That means that their body is no longer able to process blood sugar, is having problems being regulated, and they are fat. They're basically getting fat at some degree. So we think that it's leaky gut, mostly from that, things, toxins, and things that are not supposed to be in our bloodstream and in our bodies are getting through the gut barrier in our body. And we're constantly dealing with inflammation and autoimmune response to that. And that's largely being caused by food that we're consuming that biologically we're not supposed to be consuming at the amounts that we are.
Okay. So one of the questions that I know, and I have to ask you because I know it's going to come up a million times, is like, when I don't like fruits and vegetables. They're all nasty to me, man. Oh my God. I hate them. But
you don't like any fruits?
Bananas, maybe, right? Like, like maybe, right? Like
some chocolate or blueberries or, you know,
chocolate maybe, but like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not really a fruit and vegetable guy, but I eat them. And I'll admit, like, listen, when I sit down and every day for a week, I eat fruits for breakfast, right? I have some form of fruit. And then for lunch or dinner, I sit down and have a really big salad or red peppers and things like that, right? There's no denying that I feel better, right? Like, I feel higher energy. I feel cleaner. I just feel overall better. Now, I'm not saying necessarily in comparison to strictly meat, because I don't think I've ever truly eaten just strictly meat, right? But like, obviously, it must be better than something, because I feel better when I eat them, right? So like, why is it, typically speaking, then, that when people do eat fruits and vegetables and they're like, oh man, I feel so much better, what is happening there? And why would an all meat diet give that same effect, but also better? Like, what is it actually cutting out?
So I think people are feeling better because they're switching from a standard American diet where they're just eating total crap to more whole food diet with the fruits and vegetables. So that's like kind of the first piece I would say. Like, if you're eating a spinach salad versus the McDonald's cheeseburger with, you know, white bun and French fries, you're probably going to feel better, even though technically the salad doesn't have any red meat in it. The next level up is if you can get whole, all quality meat and you can cook it in a way where, you know, you're not just burning the crap out of it or deep frying it in oil. When you get to that level, now you've nixed out the plant phytochemicals that are going to be triggering for a lot of people. And so it's like that first level, okay, fruits and vegetables. Okay, maybe I feel good. Great. You just kind of substituted them for probably crap. The other thing I would say, and this is a big piece of it, is there's a transitionary period. So for a lot of people who go, for example, from a carbohydrate diet to a ketogenic diet, they struggle for about a week or two, or maybe even 3 weeks with what's called the keto flu. And they basically, their metabolism.
Joe Rogan talked about it, man. He was crapping his pants.
Yeah, he was. And that was actually probably more of a gut microbiome shift than a metabolic shift, but it's probably both. And so in my book, I say, look, if you're going to do the carnivore diet, you're probably going to plan for 2 to 3 weeks of just diarrhea and just low energy and shifting, because what's happening is your small intestine is where you digest most of your animal foods, and your large intestine is where you digest a lot of your plant foods. It's just, that's how we evolutionarily evolved from our primate ancestors who ate a lot more plants. When you shift the macro scale of the food that you're consuming to a lot more animal foods, you need bacteria to keep up with that in a different volume. And so a lot of people tell me, like, I don't feel that good when I eat a big steak. You know, I feel heavy. I can't, you know, it's just like, I feel a lot lighter and I feel a lot just more like free when I eat all these plants and vegetables.
Yes.
And I just go like, Yeah, because you don't have the gut microbiome shift that you need. Like I can
Mm.
knock down literally like 2 pounds of ribeyes and then go sprint 30 minutes later and
Wow.
I'm fine. It's like your body needs a couple weeks to feed the bacteria and you need to adjust. It's a diet that you haven't eaten ever. And now you're
Yeah.
expecting yourself to feel amazing the moment you shift.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense. What do you do for breakfast?
Usually some form of steak, and I'll do like a couple raw egg yolks for the choline and the vitamins in the eggs. I actually get duck eggs here local at a farmer's market. I'm in Austin, Texas. We've got amazing farmers
Nice.
here. And then I am a really big fan of raw beef fat. So
Hmm.
a lot of people don't know this. You can go to a local butcher shop or a farmer's market and you can get the fat from the cow, and you can actually that is like pure fat. It's super cheap. It's loaded with vitamins. You can get grass-fed fat for like $6-7 a pound. And I eat that and I just mix it in with my food. And it's like a great source of fat for me to kind of just fuel myself.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Dude, this has been fascinating. Guys, I want to be very clear. I am not in any way endorsing or not endorsing this. Just to let you know, I just thought this was a really interesting topic. Go try it for yourself. I mean, you seem to be pretty set on it, man. Like that this works, and I applaud you for it. That's awesome. So I appreciate you coming on here and kind of like explaining this, because this is a whole new world. And I like what you said there about kind of at the end that it does take some time to switch over to this, to let your body get up to speed with it. It's not like just tomorrow you're gonna start eating all meat and just feel amazing overnight. There is a process there. I think the big question now for people is, all right, maybe I want to try this, or at least I want to learn a little bit more about this and what you do and what you're teaching, what we're talking about here. Where can people go and find you? Where are some resources that we can give them and point them in that direction?
So the best resource right now we have is our YouTube channel. I started one with my team called Carnivore Kurt with K's. So Carnivore with a K and Kurt with a K. They can go there. They can learn all about that. We have a book that's dropping next Monday. I took 4 months of my life to write it. It was it's my baby. So
Nice.
all the YouTube videos basically have link descriptions in our bio to drive people to our carnivorekurt.com website, where we have information about the book, and they can join the wait list for that drop. And then Carnivore Kurt is basically all of our social handles, so they can learn more about that there.
Nice. All right, sweet. All right, well, we'll drop all that down below as well in the description there. So guys, go check out the YouTube channel, the Instagram, and then we'll also include a link to the book. I don't know if we have to wait till it comes out. If you're listening past 3 days after this comes out, then it'll probably be out. Yeah. We'll have that link down below there as well. But dude, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you coming on here and just explaining all this. This has been a fascinating conversation. Is there any awesome last words or anything that you have for the audience?
No, I think if you're struggling with gut issues, you're struggling with anxiety, maybe, and a lot of this is subjective. So just keep in mind, like, these experiments can be really fun to do as a person, because, for example, I used to not really care as much about my sleep, and I really dialed it in, and it's like almost like an alcoholic who doesn't realize they're drunk. So when you dial these things in, you get a huge edge. And if you can add 10, even 5% more to your mental clarity, and you can make better decisions and you can run your day better, I think a diet like this can be really powerful, and it's super easy to implement. So I highly recommend checking it out if you're in any sort of realm dealing with something like that. And it's something you can easily implement.
Cool. Kurt, man, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on. Guys, as always, hustle. God bless. Do not be afraid to think different, because those of us that think different are going to be the ones that change the world. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating and a review on both Facebook and on iTunes, guys. Let's get those numbers up. I appreciate you all. I love you all, and I will see you on the next episode. Take it easy, fam. Peace.